I called today's talk, Baby, You Can Drive My Car, Your Car. Getting the Beatles mixed up in there. Baby, you can drive your car and I'll drive mine. And it's a bit of a follow-up on the talk I did last week, where I talked about sharing the road and staying in our own lane. And using the idea of cars and vehicles and as a metaphor for our own lives, that we're each essentially our car and that we're on a journey. And as the week went by, it just felt like there was so much more insight to this idea of using the car as a metaphor for each one of us, that I decided to add a little bit more to it. And so at our Wisdom Wednesday discussion on the past Wednesday night, one of the participants, who I got permission from her to repeat this story, we were talking about this idea of what does it feel like when you're on the road and somebody cuts you off? How has that experience happened for you? And I see some laughter already in the room. And Marlo, who used to attend Unity of White Rock, told this story of how she was driving on the highway and somebody cut her off, and it just bugged her so much. She was irritated, she was angry, she was frustrated, and she decided that she was going to catch up to that guy, and the next opportunity she could get, she was going to give him the finger. I'm sure a few of us can relate. So it turns out that eventually they did get to a place where she was able to make connection with him. And she said, and I thought, okay, this is my opportunity. I'm going to give him the finger. And so she said, this is what I did. And I just thought it was amazing, because what she said after is, I felt so much better. Better than she would have felt if she had done the read between the lines. And I just thought it was such a great story that I asked her permission to share it with you today. And I want us to think about the idea of us being in that car and our lives being our life is a highway, as Tom Cochrane said in his song. And the idea of our tendency to veer into someone else's lane, which potentially can cut them off, as well as our awareness that there are times that people will come into our lane and try to do things that aren't theirs to do. And of course, the reason I chose this title is because of the Beatles song, Baby, You Can Drive My Car, Yes, I'm Gonna Be a Star. Baby, you can drive my car, and maybe I'll love you. Just had to throw that in there because it's the Beatles, so you got to throw it in there. Think for a moment, though, of the consequences of following too closely, of veering into someone's lane, of moving too fast on the highway or moving too slow on the highway. Think of what happens if we're driving and any of those things happen. Don't we feel anxiety and a tendency to be nervous and frustrated and irritated? and wanting a certain amount of vengeance. And at some times, depending on how bad that cutoff is and how irresponsible that other driver may appear, we may even wish them harm. We feel pressured. Sometimes when somebody, especially when they're coming into our space, we don't know what to do. We may feel intimidated. We may feel shaken, uncertain about our competence. And at its very extreme, we may actually get run off of our course. We may cut someone else off. They may cut us off. It could be that we have some serious harm that gets done. And even if it's just what they call a near miss, which I always think is a strange word because really it was a near hit. But in the industry, when there's an accident that almost happens, they call it a near miss rather than a near hit. But even if it is this near miss, then there could be some post-traumatic stress that we experience later as we continue. Our hearts race. We're afraid. We're nervous. We can't think straight. Well, the same applies to our non-driving lives, doesn't it? Whether we find that we're veering into someone else's lane or they're veering into ours, these same consequences appear. That we get upset, we get angry, we are uncertain about how we should proceed. We're not sure what to do. We feel powerless. We know something isn't right, and we feel shaken. And at times, we have that same long-term effect. That PTS, again, I wouldn't say it's a disorder, it's an experience, a post-traumatic stress experience. Now think about what would happen, envision, what would happen if we all stayed in our lane and continued in our journey safely. Not veering into someone else's lane, trusting that we know how to avoid when they come into ours. Now we're in a place where we can drive feeling calm, where we can enjoy the journey. There's a sense of competence, both for ourselves and trust that others have that as well. We might even get to the part where we connect with other drivers with a smile as they pass us or as they pass us or we pass them. There's a sense of, we've got this. We're all in this together. We're sharing the road, and we're flowing. Again, I'm talking about cars, and we can see how the same thing applies in our lives. That when each of us is flowing in our own life, minding our own business and allowing others to mind theirs, that things can flow and be calm. And there's the sense of, we've got this. A sense of mutual respect. A sense of mutual competency. A sense of love and joy, that connection with a smile. Eye connection. And so what I'd like to talk about in a little bit of detail now is the idea of two areas. One is when we are the person who is in our car, and one when someone else, and we have this danger and start tending into someone else's lane. And the other is when we're driving along and somebody tends to come in our lane. In both cases, I'm going to use an acronym. And the acronym is, let's make sure it's on here, CAR. I want us to think in terms of catch, and then allow, and then respect. When we veer out of our lane, the first thing we want to do is catch ourselves doing that. And last week I spoke about the idea of rumble strips. You know, when you're driving and there are markings on the side of the road, sometimes they're like yellow or red. Other times they're just the actual pavement, but they're like ridges. And when you veer into somebody else's lane, or you're veering off your path, they will wake you up with this da-da-da-da-da, this shuddering effect. Well, what we want to do is catch these rumble strips, catch when we are veering out of the lane. And what are the warning signs that we're about to do that? Well, in a car, of course, the shuddering is a physical sound and experience. But when we're doing it with people or groups, then it's not always so easy to notice those rumble strips, but they are there. And what they look like is people choosing to cut off from you. People choosing to walk away. People not quite so willing to tell you everything, and maybe not willing to disclose, or even going so far as to lie. These are signs that you are threatening somebody else's sense of safety. And you may be treading in waters that you don't belong. Or, to keep my analogy going, moving into their lane. So catch yourself. Look at people's reactions. Catch it. And then allow. Now, in cars, of course, every car on the road is a different color and a different shape and a different model and has different capacities. And in many ways, they're all so different. And yet, in fundamental ways, they're all the same. They get us from point A to point B. They have a couple of doors or 4 doors. They have 4 wheels for the most part. There are some goofy-looking cars out there with 3, but 4. And that's also a reminder for us. Because isn't it true that we all come in different colors and shapes and sizes? That we all come different. And yet each one of us has the same 206 bones in the adult body. The same experience of birth and life and death. The same color of blood. And in real life, when we look at a car that's different from ours, we don't judge that car. We don't say, oh, well, it's red, therefore I'm not going to talk to it, or I'm not going to share the road. We allow differences. So let us allow differences for ourselves. We do not need to move into someone else's lane and try to encourage that car to go faster or slower. We don't know where the car has been. We don't know where the car is going. We don't know what the resources are within that car. We don't know how well it was taken care of. But we do know that cars can change how they behave even on the same day, depending on whether they're warmed up and how well they're lubricated and so on. And so what do we do if we are wanting to have a calm road? We allow the car to do its thing and we keep our eye on our GPS. Some people call that God positioning system. On the thing that matters to us, our goals, not somebody else's. Have you noticed how easy it is, though, to see what everyone else needs to do and how they all should get to where they're going? And I honestly think that part of that is a way to protect us from our own feeling of, ooh, am I going to get there? But that's for another talk. We have this prideful tendency to think that our way is the only right way. And each one of us has that tendency. And so I just remind you of that acronym, We Are Right. WAR. Whenever we're in a place where we think that our way is the only right way, then we are in an energy of war. Allow instead. And then respect. If we can believe and trust that every driver on the road has earned their right to be there through testing and safety inspections and so on, then let us just treat each car with the respect that it likely deserves. And let that be true for us as humans in our everyday experiences as well. Because, as we say in unity, there is only one power. There is no spot that God is not. Each person is a face of God. Can we trust that each person has intelligence and wisdom, is able to change, is able to adapt? Are we able to do unto others as we would have them do unto us? Because there are times when we've been that crazy person going too fast, have we not? Because if I am late one more time, I'm going to lose my job. Or my wife is having a baby, I need to get to the hospital. Or my beloved is in the hospital and passing, and I need to get there. We don't know the stories. But we know that there have been times when we've been the exception to the rule, because for the most part, everybody does really well on the road. And when they don't, maybe it's because they're experiencing an exception too. And then, as part of respect, let us be accountable. There are times when we will veer into another person's lane. It's going to happen because we care about them and we don't want them to get hurt, so we're going to try and protect them. Or we see exactly what they need to do to be better, and so we're going to tell them. And with any luck, they'll give us a finger. Maybe a hand. And when we come to ourselves and realize it, let's go to that other vehicle and apologize. And resolve to do it better next time. Very briefly, how do we stop people from coming into our lane? Walt asked the question last week. You didn't talk about the horn. When do we lay on the horn? Well, here's a place where we lay on the horn, and we use that exact same acronym. Catch. When you notice that someone is coming into your lane, catch it. How do you know it? In human form, we see it with dis-ease, a sense of discomfort, a sense of ooh, a sense of ick. Something doesn't feel right. There's a rumbling as they veer into the lane. And we actually experience the rumble strip this way as well. So catch it. And then allow for their poor behavior, because guess what? There will be poor behavior. Now, I'm not saying allow the behavior. I'm saying allow for the behavior. Make allowances for the fact that none of us are perfect, and just as we have strayed into other people's lanes, there are times when they will stray into ours. Think of the Lord's Prayer. Forgive us our trespasses as we have forgiven those who trespass against us. I love the literal idea of trespass. I think it's very, very powerful. And so when we see this happening, make allowance for it, because then you won't be so shocked. Think of it as defensive driving. And then, respectfully, lay on the horn. And by that, I don't mean lay on the horn. I'm just doing that for dramatic effect, if you will. But respectfully, tap the horn, flash the lights, gently put on the brakes, hold up your hand. And respectfully request that they go back to where they are in their own space. And the reason I say respectfully is because if it's not respectful, then chances are what you're going to have is, oh yeah, well, I'll show you, and I'll show you. And we get this collision. And what is more powerful? Well, Jesus said it when he said, when you walk, if someone compels you to walk 1 mile, go with them 2. Keep your power. They come into your lane, ask them to leave. And if they don't, and it continues, then you may choose to have a different discussion. And we've all had those discussions. And it may include choosing a different path. And if that happens, again, do it respectfully. If there must be disengagement, then do it with dignity. I subscribe, or don't subscribe, but I'm on the email list for Quora. Have you ever heard of Quora? It's like people ask questions and then they post answers. And I opened my email last night after I sent out the order of service at after 11 o'clock, anyhow. And what was in my email, it's too long for me to read the whole thing, but it basically starts with, I'm a good driver, but I pulled right out in front of this guy, who of course leaned on his horn hard. I thought it was so interesting that I was just working on this, and that was the email that I got. And this person goes on to say that they got into the parking lot, and sure enough, the same guy was there, and he came towards her, and she basically, I'll read it. I braked, threw it into reverse, came up beside him, rolled down my window, and just listened. I let him rant. Learn how to effing drive for F's sake. It's not quite like that in here. That was probably the nicest thing he said in all of it. When he was done, I said in an even tone that I've perfected for escalations at home, you have a right to be pissed. I cut you off. I'm really sorry. I'm usually a pretty good driver, but that was a really stupid mistake. I'm sorry I put us both in danger. The guy didn't know what to say. He was expecting a fight. So instead of this, he got this. He sort of stuttered, still mad, but visibly trying to process what I just said. Then I said, the woman says, thank you for being on the ball and saving us both today with your quick reflexes. He literally mumbled, geez, just be careful. And then he walked away. Later on, they're both in the grocery store. And this guy comes and taps her on the shoulder. And this is her quote. It's the angry dude. Only he isn't angry. He's humble. He says, you said sorry to me, but I am the one who owes you an apology. I had a really bad morning. Some bad news at work. Thank you for reminding me that everyone makes mistakes, including me. I acted really SH*TTY, calling you names and stuff. I'm really sorry. Isn't that a lovely story? Catch yourself. Allow for mistakes. And treat each other respectfully, which includes telling the truth, being accountable. In this way, In this way, we can remember that we can ride our car and allow others to ride theirs. My baby, you can drive your car. I'll drive mine. I bless you.